He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
Welcome to The Alex Marlow Show, where we are supportive of these onesies. We got a long show today. I can guarantee that because we're talking to Bryan Callen later, which I mentioned on yesterday's show. Comedian and really a well-rounded guy who's just thoughtful about a lot of different things and well-known to a lot of people, particularly Joe Rogan's audience, but Hollywood and podcasting, etc. And so we had a long talk with him. But those of you who are used to getting news updates from me, I was in the chair recording stuff, so I figured I'd chime in on some big things going on. I'll tell you the story I'm hottest on right now is the trade war and the spin that's coming out of all the fools who are out there who are saying that, well, we can't have a trade war. Trump's going to lose. Gustavo Petro, the alcoholic fool in Colombia, is going to eat our lunch. Okay, well, that didn't work out. And Trump is just going to make the cost of avocados go through the ceiling. Well, now they're saying that Trump's alleged win is actually Mexico and Canada doing the things they were already going to do. So that's the spin, particularly out of CNN. Do any of you believe that? Do any of you believe that they're doing exactly the same things? That the 10,000 troops headed to the border from Mexico are exactly the same? That Canada, which announced is going to have a fentanyl czar? Do you think all that's the same? Of course not. It is. The claim makes no sense. Trump went through this whole thing, and he would not have done that if they're going to do these things anyway. It is simply a cope. The fact that Trump had another win, he's doing a dance in your faces, and you're trying to figure out how to deal with it because you're not used to it. I'll tell you, I saw Van Jones doing one of his freakouts again. I don't want to give him too much airtime because he's very manipulative about getting that stuff. He's very clever about getting attention. But he was just saying how much smarter Trump is than everyone else again. And like, yes, it's true. He is. He's smarter. He's the guy. He is the main character of the moment. So Biden, according to a report, someone caught this buried 40-something paragraph in the New York Times article. But a government accountability office said that in 2023, fiscal year 2023, 71 federal programs had $236 billion in improper payments. And that's just from the old guard doing accountability. So way at the bottom of an article that was mostly a hit piece on Musk and Doge. We love Doge. I've been texting with Senator Ertz's staff. We're going to get her on, talk about how Doge is coming on soon. It's coming up. So we'll do that soon. But there is a historic amount of good. JD sent out a tweet today saying that he had anticipated that Doge could maybe cut like a quarter of a trillion, and it's going to be much higher. I think it's going to be much higher. Cernovich was saying, he pays close attention to this stuff, that he thinks a trillion would be pretty good. I think it can go more. I really do. And I'm putting this down because I don't like to make a prediction unless I'm feeling really good about it, because I've got a pretty good track record. Not 100%, but it's pretty good. So I think they're going to go bigger. Musk is the guy to do this. And I think Musk is absolutely wants to protect his interests in China. I don't think he's pure at heart. He's very new to MAGA. I think his H-1B position is appalling. But I think this is one where I'm so in with him. I'm exactly lockstep with him on this. I think he'd be relentless. The USAID move that he made was ruthlessly awesome. And I just can't, when you see stuff like this, and maybe we're talking, how much of our budget do we think is complete fraud? 10%, 15%. I'm talking about total fraud. I'm not talking about overspending on trips and people do stay-at-home jobs and, having a staff of 14 when you really need a staff of 6. I'm talking about flat-out fraud. I bet it's a bunch. And then you start cutting from there. You start blowing out all these people. You give some buyouts, do some firings, make it just completely the people who are working in our federal bureaucracies are the people who want to be there because they want to do some good, not just careerists who want an easy paycheck. So if we can get to that mindset, which I think we can, we're going to do some historic cutting, and we're going to make America rich again if we do that. So I'm pretty jacked up. Trump's reportedly now had his sights on the education department. There's no reason for it. We started a Department of Education, and all of our test scores go down. They keep going down. We keep spending more money, and the test scores keep going down. So I don't understand it. If you hire a cleaning crew to come in and clean your house, and you come into the kitchen and there's, a pancake batter all over the ceiling, and, one of the kids is hanging on the ceiling fan, spinning around and around, you're saying, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't have done this. Maybe we should have done something else. So that's the Department of Education in a nutshell. It was never supposed to be a federal government issue. It's not a federal government issue. There's no way. The only way you're going to have good education if it's hyper local. If the schools are good, PTAs are good, maybe you've got a good school district, that is the biggest you're going to go. It's fine. You have a standardized test once a year so the states can keep up with what's going on, so they can pinpoint some big problems. The big problem. They can pinpoint the big problems. There should be no federal Department of Education. You got to be kidding me. We can't handle that stuff. Tailoring education to individual children, but at a federal level? You'd be kidding me. Ridiculous. Cut it now. Musk, do it. All right. Over in my neck of the woods, you guys may have seen all these protests. They're doing they get the day without a Mexican protest going on. All these pro-migration protests. You're really seeing people reveal who they are, because this is a fundamental issue. And we've talked about this. Any of you who followed anything I've done for the last decade, you know this, that I don't understand how people maintain that it's a moral position to keep the border open. It's wide open. No good comes from that. Fentanyl, people leeching off of our system, people who balkanize, don't speak the language. And even if they do some good and they get jobs, they're still driving down the wages of Americans who would do those jobs just at a slightly elevated rate. It's not hugely elevated. It'll be 10%, maybe 15%. It's the Americans will do those jobs. They just won't do the jobs at the rate that the illegal aliens will do them for. So it's always been that way. I've never understood it. And I've never understood that you're a racist if you feel that way. It just seems very logical. It seems like a math problem. It seems like an economics problem. It doesn't seem like a race problem. It is something that I've never understood, that why we consider it a positive to have an open border. And I think you're seeing this on full display. So people blocking the freeways in Los Angeles over the weekend. Why? Why does that help your cause? They're flying the Mexican flag. This is the United States of America. Not helping you to fly the Mexican flag. If you're at all open-minded politically, of course, if you're on my side, if you're on the right, if you're on the MAGA side, you think it's crazy. But if you're at all open-minded and you see people thinking, well, we're upset about the deportations of lawbreakers, criminals, and we're upset about the fentanyl, and so your reaction is to block the freeway so that normal people can't go about their lives, and you're waving the flag of a foreign country, I don't see that persuading people, at least for me. So anyway, the LA Times is totally schizophrenic. It's fun to watch because this guy, Patrick Soon-Shiong, the guy who's in charge of it, he is very based now, which is red-pilled on Twitter, on X. But his paper is still weird. They got LA Times writer celebrating Mexican flags at a pro-migration street protest. How do you celebrate the Mexican flag at an anti-illegal immigration protest? You put an American flag. American flag, if you're going to try to be persuasive, we're not persuaded by the Mexican flag. We're America first. That's your problems with the America first crowd. Interesting. All right. So the LA Times now, they've got writers championing it. They launched a new climate change podcast. So don't be fooled. It's the same group of people. They'll publish one op-ed from a conservative. Hey, if they invited me to do an op-ed, I would do it. I'm of course. We want to do some good, but they're not that great. They still got the same stuff going on. Can't trust Patrick Soon-Shiong, at least not for a while. I'm glad he's trying in a way, but I always assume it's a head fake. Yeah, the USAID, you know who's in charge now? Any of you are skeptical? Marco Rubio, a guy who got universal confirmation in the Senate to be Secretary of State. Everyone likes Marco. Not a hardcore guy, wants to be a good leader. He's down there with Bukele now in El Salvador. This is the story of the day, ladies and gentlemen. This is the story of the day. In El Salvador, they've offered the United States a plan to take our worst criminals and put them in those super viral, famous El Salvadorian jails that they've got. The most fun prison in the world. Or is it the least fun? But you guys have all seen the footage online that they do, because it makes you not want to mess up down there. All these gang members, all the tats on their faces, on their skulls, running around in white underwear. And it is all completely locked down, under control. People are packed in there like rats. It seems totally miserable. It's for violent criminals. You know, this is not for the people who underpaid their taxes $100. These are for real bad guys. But that looks painful down there, and they've offered to take Americans. And I've been saying this. We need to have deportations for regular Americans. Let's just do it. Let's just make it as equity. You just want to have deportations for legal aliens. We want deportations for Americans. That's what equity is all about. So if you're a bad enough American, you get sent down to El Salvador. I checked with Ken Klukowski on this, our senior legal editor, who's one of the most knowledgeable people in the country on the Constitution, period. He was instrumental to Trump defeating Jack Smith. More on that in a later show. I'm really excited to share that story with you, but don't have time today. But brilliant guy, works for us at Breitbart. And I said, can we do this? And then he said, there's nothing in the Constitution that says you're entitled to be in a jail on American soil. Pretty cool, right? So you can get deported to El Salvador temporarily to your prison sentence. And Bukele wants them. And he wants some money for it, but that little money for us, whatever that would cost, would be a fortune for him. And he's trying to make that country a vacation destination. I have a longer conversation about this on today's Breitbart Fight Club with Francis Martel, because I'm so jacked up on this story. I think it's a great story. So, but imagine that, our worst, most violent criminals. You don't just go to Guantanamo, you go to El Salvador, to one of those crazy prisons. So cool. Bukele has said that his country will take in convicted criminal Bob Menendez, former Democrat senator of New Jersey. Deeply corrupt guy. And here's another Jack Smith connection. Jack Smith went after him and failed. So Smith tried to get Menendez, couldn't do it. So even with his gnarly tactics that Smith's known for. But Menendez was hit with all these corruption charges and was accused of taking bribes for doing stuff for Qatar. Recall he had the 13 gold bars and $486,000 in his home that was all stashed. Gold bars are, I mean, those are pricey. Those are at least 10 G's a pop, right? I don't know what the conversion rate is right now. I mean, you guys know anything about gold and Priority Gold in particular. PriorityGold.com. You guys know that. If you're getting your gold bars, you better be getting them from Priority Gold at this point if you're listening to this show. But Menendez had all these gold bars. I wonder if he was a Priority Gold customer. I don't know. Maybe the advertisers don't want us connecting them to Bob Menendez. But they're fun people. They get it. They see I'm joking. Anyway, the Bob Menendez is supposed to go to jail for a long time, and El Salvador wants him. Oh, I dig it. I dig it so much. There's so much winning going on, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I can't resist it. I can't resist coming in and telling you everything that's going on. A former Democrat candidate, Adam Frisch of Colorado, told the Wall Street Journal that 20 big cities, Aspen and Martha's Vineyard, are all the left has. It's all that's left of the Democrat Party. 20 big cities, Aspen and Martha's Vineyard. That's all they got. And so this is why I feel like all this territory is gettable. It's because we've won the culture war, because we've stolen all the left's great ideas like the tariffs and we're using them more effectively than they ever would, because they have terrible spokespeople like AOC and Chuck Schumer. These people are not appealing. Ilhan Omar, you saw those clips I played yesterday, if you checked out yesterday's show. They're not persuasive. Jasmine Crockett barking about criminals. Dr. Quintessa, whatever her name is, singing about biochemistry at the DNC. Is that what she's singing about? I'm getting confused. Anyway, but she was the DNC candidate singing about how she's afraid of the government. They're strange people. They're weird. They're weird. Think about Weirdo Waltz, Tim Waltz. They're not appealing. This is our time. We can get it all. They've become a regional party. They're just metropolitan, big government Marxists. All they are. Cosmopolitan. That's it. That's all they got. We got everyone else. And I think we got a lot of those people in those cities as well. So I'm so excited. I do want to check in one more because I want to see how Hollywood's doing. We got Cynthia Nixon, famous for Sex and the City. And I want you to play this because if I was doing a sketch and I was impersonating a leftist right now, it would be word for word, verbatim, what she says at this trans rally that she was speaking at. Let me play this for you.
Most importantly, I am here today as the mother of a proud trans man. Yeah. I am here today as the aunt of a proud trans man. My best friend's kid is trans, and my kid's best friend is trans.
Okay, so she's the mother of a proud trans, because it's not enough to be trans, you be proud of it, that you are having mental health issues. And then she's got trans nephew or niece, whatever. It's hard to know. You can't keep up. And all their friends are trans. So do you think they all are just happen to be born in the same Manhattan enclave and just all the 1 in a million chance that they were born the wrong gender? They all just happen to live right at the same place, at the same time? Or do you think this is a contagion? Do you think that they were groomed on TikTok and groomed on the social media platforms on YouTube and groomed by each other and groomed by Hollywood predators like Cynthia Nixon? Maybe that's why there's all these trans people, because it hasn't just been normalized, it's been encouraged by the Hollywood left who likes this deviant sexual stuff.
My wife and I, our lives are filled with the most amazing, beautiful, brave, trans people, young and old, but especially young.
See, this is what I'm saying about how it feels like I wrote it. It's not just young and old, but especially young. It should not be especially young. If this is science, it should be the same generation to generation, roughly. Marginal percent or two increase or decrease, depending on genetics. But the fact that we've seen this surge is what shows you it's a cultural phenomenon and not a scientific phenomenon. Because when you're talking about evolution, when you're talking about biology, you're talking about thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years to see a change as rapid as the trans stuff. So it's cultural. And that makes you know that it's not science, not real. It's something that's been, we've been convinced that it's true. We've been sold, we've been marketed.
My trans kid had his top surgery at NYU a number of years ago. His doctors were fantastic.
Top surgeon, that's mutilating your body.
Fantastic. His surgeon was the best we could have imagined. And the idea that the city is filled with young people who thought they had a place to go where they could receive the highest care, and that place has now been shut to them, sickens me to my core.
This all sickens me. All the cheers, it sickens me. I mean, I'm tempted. It's fun to dunk on it, but it's getting me sad. It's getting me very sad. And all of you as young people, you have to be so vigilant because there's so many predators out there. They're grooming you. They're grooming your kids. And it's interesting to hear this because I had my show yesterday. I was talking about how at the very end of the show, I talked quite a bit about how I think it's a good thing to live in blue areas is generally good, but you can definitely cross a line. If I lived in an environment like this, where all the kids are going trans and, all of the parents are proud of it and they're encouraging it, they're giving impassioned speeches to cheering crowds, I would leave. So there is a line to cross. So important to have that moment of clarity. California Democrats passed $50 million to fight Trump, defend illegal aliens. And at the same time, they're seeking fire aid. Guys, you're not helping yourself. I'll tell you this. I've been riding for LA that we need that federal aid. And I look very bad. I bring this to your attention because I have integrity, guys. But California passing more money to spend to fight Trump when all that money needs to go to fire aid and then fire prevention for the future because they will be back. And all they want to do is fight Trump. They're so lost. It's mostly good. But again, if you live in these areas, it's not great. It's not great. We're going to win them all back, though. We're going to win 50 states. 2028, we're winning 50 states. We're winning them all. Maybe by 2032. 2028 is going to be fast. That's a fast turnaround. But I'm encouraged. Please email me at aloha@alexmarlowe.com for questions, comments, life advice, solicitations. You can ask me anything, and I'll bring up the most interesting topics on the show, on shows that are not going way over an hour, which this one will. And other than that, liking, subscribing. I've been posting a lot of clips on X, so follow me over there, posting some on Instagram as well. We are Breitbart. If you're not following Breitbart's Instagram, you're really missing out, so that's a big deal. All right, thanks to producer Misty. Thanks for all of you in the audience. This is our interview with Bryan Callen. You're going to have a blast with this, and if you can't get around to it now, it'll be good over the weekend too, but I think it's good now. I think you'll like it. I think a lot of the news today is kind of similar to yesterday. So I think this is it's a good one. You'll enjoy yourself. Here it is. Folks, this is the financial emergency. BRICS nations, China, Russia, and 8 allies are finalizing a payment system to destroy the US dollar. They already control 36% of global GDP, and they're growing 5 times faster than America. U.S. sanctions on Russia kind of backfired, and now Putin's rushing BRICS to erase the dollar forever. 4 major economies already trade without the dollar. Elon Musk warns nations are fleeing the dollar, and billionaire Sam Zell admits cash could wipe you out. Once BRICS flips the switch, could happen any day, the dollar could plunge to pennies overnight. Your savings, your retirement, your buying power, all of it goes away. But you're not helpless. Physical gold and silver are the only assets that they can't inflate freeze, or erase. You guys know I partner with Priority Gold. My friends over there have a free wealth defense guide that reveals a little-known IRS loophole to shield your wealth with precious metals before BRICS acts. Text FREEDOM to 24999 now for your free copy. That's FREEDOM to 24999 or visit PriorityGold.com. Time's running out. Don't risk it. Don't let the dollar collapse and have that steal your retirement. You can fight back today. So simple. Text FREEDOM to 24999 now. All right, Bryan Callen is with me. He's a comedian, podcaster, all-around interesting guy. I was on his show recently. We did a super long and super interesting, deep conversation. He likes to go deep. And Bryan, I was thinking about this, that normally you know people from something. That's the guy who does X, Y, or Z. Especially in this moment, everyone's trying to craft a specific brand where you're known for a specific thing. And I feel like you've got a variety of things you do. You do stand-up, you're in movies, you podcast, you're part of the sort of Joe Rogan universe of buddies. It's the, when you get stopped on the street, is there one particular thing where people know you from? Because for me, you're the guy from The Hangover and that amazing wedding scene. I mean, that's like one of the best scenes and one of the best movies of the century. It's literally one of the best movies of the century. And you've got a showstopper scene. I mean, that for me is it. But for you, that's, 15 years ago, like maybe that isn't what you want to get known for.
I never think about it. I think that podcasting with all the acting, there's always people that so I did the Goldbergs for a long time and my character ended up being very popular. So I got a spin-off my own show. And back in the day, that would have been everything. And by the time I was doing that, I was making more money on my podcast. I was getting stopped as Bryan Callen in places like Canada because of my podcast. And nobody cared about ABC. Nobody watched. We probably got, I remember on a good day, the ratings were like 6 million people. That was huge, ABC. Yeah. But I was doing, when I would do Rogan or I would do, my own podcast, we were number 4 in the world for a while. We were getting, I could have gone to Scotland or Ireland or, it was just the weirdest thing. So I think we were getting bigger ratings just on a podcast. And my agent didn't even know what the hell a podcast was. So, so that changed everything. So I think that, when you do enough for as long as I've done, and you're it's this shotgun effect, you don't know where they recognize you from. And they'll either be big fans or they'll go, do you fly this plane a lot? Have I seen you in this restaurant before?
Yeah. So that's the level of notoriety I have because I was behind the scenes guy forever because that worked very well for me. And then it's just over the last few years, it's become not tenable to remain relevant and be entirely behind the scenes. It's almost impossible to pull off. It's such a hyper visual voyeuristic culture that we're in at the moment. Yeah. So I've been out there and I'm at the phase of fame where I just get smiles. Like, so I know that they're just processing. Like, I've seen this guy. Yeah. I don't know where. Yeah. I don't think I dislike him.
Well, if you start playing the game, if you start playing the relevance game or the fame game, I learned a long time ago in this business, it doesn't last and it's a false god to begin with. And you better be careful about putting your eggs in that basket because 100% you will be on a treadmill and it never ends. And I think that really, for what little fame I've had, and by the way, it ebbs and flows. Yeah. What it really means is people recognize you that you don't know, and you get a little bit self-conscious. You've got to be nicer than you would normally be. You can't be rude when you're annoyed at something. All that stuff. But
but that's kind of good though, because so I live in an area just north of LA where it's sort of mostly conservative. I would say it's slightly more conservative. Like you never say you voted for Kamala Harris at a T-ball game in my neighborhood. Like you wouldn't do that, even though the county is mostly liberal. But there's some nosy people. That's one of the problems with the neighborhood. And so for me, knowing that I could, if I get annoyed with something, if someone's being too much of a hall monitor, and I get in their face, and knowing that if that goes viral online, it's not going to be good for my career. It's probably good for me walking around to think that, well, I don't really want to get busted being a jerk to people in public. Yeah.
Yes, I agreed. But think about, like, as you get older too, like fame, whatever you want to call it, when you're younger, I swear to God, you want to be famous probably, especially as a guy, because you think of I swear this is a terrible thing to say, but when I would think about getting a TV show, I would think about I would think about the house I could buy, the restaurants I could eat in, the kind of wine I could order, and the women that would like me because I was a celebrity, not because of my bone structure. I don't know if you've noticed, but I know my charisma's pretty amazing. And let me just clean off this lens, but it's not like women go, look at that medium white guy. I got to get that guy. That's my type. He's 5'11", 170. Woohoo, sign me up. So, but you get
Hey, that means you're staying pretty lean though.
I'll take my shirt off at the end of this just as a bonus.
Yeah, that's good though. No, that's important.
No, but what matters as you get older is that all that, whatever the attention you get, if it translates to dollars and I can pay for my kid's future, I'm in, baby. I'm in. But I swear at this point, any attention, any of the public embrace is only relevant to me if it makes me the kind of money that can ensure my children get to go to the schools they want to go to.
Well, and you have many children. I want to talk to you about that because this show is a amateur parenting podcast. It's a full-time politics podcast, but an amateur parenting because that's all I do when I'm not, podcasting and putting up headlines on a website. But Bryan's got some dates. You go to bryancallen.com, Bryan with a Y, and House of Comedy in Bloomington, Minnesota, February 13th to 15th, and the Miami Improv in Doral. Are those dates the right dates, or is that wrong?
Yeah, February 20, 21, 22.
Okay, good. So do that. And so you got San Diego dates on your website. Is that real? Because I'm in San Diego right around then.
I had to cancel it because I'm doing Rogan's podcast. I'm doing the Fight Companion with some really cool people.
Of course, because I'm probably going to be in San Diego then, so I could come by and get entertained. Yeah. So one thing that's mind-blowing though is that you have 1 million Instagram followers, and that's so many. It's the political space that's almost impossible. If you notice, a lot of journalists, if you go on Twitter, they might have 800,000 followers. You go to their Instagram, they've got 4,000. Like, it's just one of these things that is. Do you get recognized from that? Is that one of these things where is that a big? Because I don't know that's like. What kind of a burden that is?
I posted a giraffe video. I talk about giraffes being basically gay camels. And I posted it to my Instagram, and I think it's got 15 million views, but also, and it's been traded back and forth some ungodly amount. So, sometimes you do something and it catches fire, and you're trending.
Yeah.
I did something on Tyson too, and that got 35 million views. I don't pay attention to this, but my nephew, who's 16, will call me and be like, "Do you see what's going on? You're viral," and so it's not something you can work at, but that a lot of followers.
No, it's interesting because I've only had one. I really dislike social media for a number of reasons. The first one is that I met my wife when we were in high school, so I don't need to get women's attention. So that's the main thing. If I was trying to I'm trying to not get women's attention. I'm trying to not put myself in a position where women are paying attention. That's the goal. Yeah. So I went viral on one thing. But, for me, that was probably 1 million views on stuff. And I tell you, it was a one-off. I was at the La Brea Tar Pits with my family, and there was a tent city that had been erected by the La Brea Tar Pits. And I did a riff on the mayor and how I love that we can now have a campgrounds at the La Brea Tar Pits. And it was like it was a one-take thing, and I kind of made it sarcastic, and that was it. It wasn't. I didn't edit it. I didn't try. I didn't even try. I just did one take on just making a funny sarcastic joke about how bad LA had gotten, and that took off. And it's a funny high. If you were going to chase that high, I don't chase the high, but if you did, that's an interesting way of life.
Humor is a great way to sort of lubricate, someone's trying to get into somebody's brain and change their heart and mind. We never talk about that enough, right? So I'm definitely more on the Breitbart side of things when it comes to politics and philosophy, certainly political philosophy, but I find that we have to be very careful about purifying our echo chamber and forgetting that part of the mission is to persuade people to at least see where we are coming from. The left has been very, very, very uncreative with how they characterize people like you and I. They'll say that we are basically racist and misogynist and transphobic and all these silly things. I can finish their sentences, right? And I think what we need to do if we want to change the world is to get people to start laughing first, because that really that's very humanizing, and it tends to let people's guards down. Because at the end of the day, this whole thing called life, sometimes you got to take the checkers board and just throw it in the air. And a good way to do that is just by humor first. And I find that when you get people laughing, you can then gently start to persuade them that maybe the way they're thinking has some holes in it. Maybe mine does too. You can start there and start making fun of yourself first.
Yeah.
And then get into why you think the other side is probably. Now, there are some things that drive me too crazy that make me insane, like gender affirming care, that terrible euphemism for child sacrifice. Yeah. That drives me nuts.
It should.
Some things I just don't have any humor about, but child abuse and mutilation is not something I can't find the humor.
You don't mind a lot of comedy out of
I can't find
out of the chemical castration. There's not a lot of chemical castration jokes in your set these days, Bryan.
I can't even get into it. I just become not.
But you're making an interesting point. Here's the thing: we have nothing to talk about if there's not some level of disagreement, and so that means no one on earth thinks exactly the same as you do or I do, and so of course we're not going to agree with every political leader because every political leader isn't exactly us. And it's not fun to talk about stuff when we entirely agree. If I was just saying I agree 100% with what you said and I thought of it exactly the same way, this wouldn't be a very interesting show. So once you accept that premise, then it's sort of surreal to think that the left was trying to impose their positions, their beliefs, as if it were facts. And they've been doing this almost for the last decade, nonstop. And if you disagree with their opinions, then you don't get to have a social media account or a bank account or something.
Listen.
How did they pull it off for so long? It's so ridiculous on its face.
I do a joke. It's really an observation in my new special about this, which is Bruce Jenner went under the knife for 8 hours and woke up Caitlyn Jenner. And 1 minute later, won Woman of the Year. And what happened was the rest of us traditional Americans were like, I have some questions,
Yeah.
What you realized immediately was that there was an entire machine, a support system that said something like, no questions from you, bigot. This is settled science. We've already seen what you've done to all the other minorities, so you can shut up and take a back seat because we have deemed this person a woman. I said, well, who's we? Well, let's go through it. All of the fashion industry, all of Hollywood, all of big tech, all of academia, all of the mainstream media, all of corporate America, and the entire Democratic Party. How did that happen? I have no idea. But whatever was going on, it just made people will kowtow to a very aggressive and loud minority. We know this, especially if that minority is very good at threatening your bottom line, your ability to earn a living, your ability to pay your mortgage, which is what would happen. When you get banned from Twitter forever for quote unquote dead naming somebody, which this is a religion, it's no different than being born again, but they've taken Christianity and bastardized it to be their own thing, in my opinion. But that's beside the point. But I think what happened was they were very good, for example, at equating so the feelings became sacrosanct because the way someone felt, their inner narrative, especially when it came to being transgender, was a matter of life and death. I mean, we get these statistics. Well, they're the one minority that is the most likely to cause self-harm and worse. Oh my God. So now sticks and stones may break my bones, but your words will kill me. And whenever you have that narrative, which I don't believe, you'll get a very, very active and vocal minority who have decided that they are now the crusaders. They're going to save lives. This is exactly what happened with not wearing masks during COVID. You're killing people, you selfish conservative. You're harming children because you don't want them to go on cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers. We don't know anything about those things. We know they cause bone density problems, etc., and lifetime sterilization. But don't worry about that because their feelings are more important than this 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 11-year-old identifies as a different gender. Okay, bro. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I know. Maybe you put that idea in their mind, you think, maybe. So I think that there was already a machine in place, strangely, a rather evil machine, to it might have been something like, and I'll tie it back. It may have been something like what the Maoists did in China. When I went to China in 1984, I went to the mainland. Everybody was wearing the same uniform. They were on the same bike and they had the same haircut. All of them, men and women. That wasn't an accident. The idea behind that was to break down category. There was no category. The idea behind, Jacques Derrida, that intellectual lightweight, that little dork who didn't make the soccer team, and this zero who masqueraded as somebody who was intelligent, he came up with this idea, that sort of non-binary way of looking at the logos, the idea that, if you have male, female, short, small, black and white, you're going to favor one over the other naturally. So to get rid of all that, to get rid of the categories of yin and yang, male and female, that's the way you get rid of prejudice. And the way you erase somebody's sort of the notion of male female, which has a built-in prejudice, is to then erase the idea that somebody is immutably male and female. It's really about how you feel. It's your inner narrative, and that's always changing. That changes with the wind. And that's the way we create a more equal world, because everybody I spoke to, I've probably spoken to 400 academics on my old podcast. All of them prayed to the great God of equality. All of them did. That was their God. That's all that mattered. Nothing. Yeah. Right. Long, sorry to ramble, but are you getting?
No. It's great. We got all the time in the world. No, it's it's an interesting thing, because the way I conceptualize it is, even though we don't want this to be true, Ben Shapiro's facts don't care about your feelings is actually the inverse of how we think. We want that to be true, but it's not true. Feelings don't care about your facts. That's how we live, is that if you feel something strong enough in this society, that becomes the truth. That becomes your truth. But then you impose your truth on me, and then it becomes just the truth. And that's really how we live.
If you were talking about feelings when I was growing up, if you're talking about how something felt, you better have been talking about shoes. All right?
Yeah.
Because right. You give a shit about your feelings, bro. What do you mean your feelings? I'm not responsible for your feelings. We were raised to be there's something about kind of realizing the world doesn't care about your feelings. That's a very good thing to internalize, isn't it?
It's the only thing that matters to me, because I've had some very tough bosses. I mean, I worked for Steve Bannon for a very long time. I did amazing work for Steve Bannon, but it was very, very hard. And if he cared about my feelings, I wouldn't have got as much work done. It's just, he doesn't care. I mean, he's actually very nice most of the time. But if he wants something a certain way and it doesn't happen, he's going to absolutely blow up your spot. And it's not bad for a young man to have to deal with that some of the time. It gets you, it coarsens you in a way that makes your life a little more productive. Maybe it's not as cozy some moments, but are we just trying for coziness? We just want to curl up with a Netflix special? That's the whole point of life.
You can't learn or get in shape or get your black belt in jiu-jitsu or get really good at the piano or do anything without going through intense discomfort. The reason we admire Navy SEALs or a concert pianist is because inherently we know what they've been through. We know that they've gone through a lot of, when you see a single mom who was working 2 jobs, but both her kids ended up in college, I look at that person, I go, that is a tough human being. I respect them inherently because I know that they've gone through a tremendous amount of sacrifice and they've conquered their appetites and they've conquered their own, the ability to push through intense discomfort for long periods of time. That's how you grow, man. It's how you grow. It's not science. It's not wrong.
Well, one thing that's interesting that's happening online that you're a big part of this is this. I feel like there's a lot of people. It's really driven, it feels like, by young men, but I think it's a lot of people in general that just really trying to make the whole internet their classroom and trying to explore really deep ideas. And but in a setting where there's sometimes comedic voices, that there's voices who intersperse other sort of cultural phenomena like ultimate fighting, stuff like that. But it does feel like there's a lot of people, while a lot of people are going into this micro 17-second videos on Instagram, there's also this counter to that where a lot of people are doing these long form podcastings where it's 3 hours of conversation. And it is captivating people. Yeah. But you're a bigger part of that. I'm more of an observer of this than I'm just starting to participate, but you're more of a participant because, you're on the biggest podcast frequently and you have a big podcast. But talk about this being a part of this ecosystem.
Well, there's this idea that, TikTok brain has taken over and you've got to do things in 15-second increments. And I totally disagree with it. It's true that is a fact, but it does not mean that human beings don't have a nostalgia and an appetite for actual substance and actual meaning. And, building acumen, building skill requires time. It requires some focus, the ability to sit still for a while. And I have a company where I do a lot of commercials for different brands. And my company, basically, we come up with funny ideas and we shoot these funny ideas. I don't believe commercials should be anything but hilarious. And I don't care what you're selling, but I'll get your attention. I'll build interest around your brand with humor. And so that's what I'm friends with the funniest people in the world. I created this comedy think tank. And what I realized was that we were coming up with commercials that were far better than anything out there. And so that's what basically I pitch. I go to these companies and I say, here I'm going to come up with really funny ads. And by the way, they're going to cost you a fraction of what you pay. And we're going to iterate along with your brand and we're going to do great commercials at very low cost over a long period of time, so that in a year, if you spend, I don't know, 100, 200 grand, you're going to know exactly what your customers respond to. Now, the point I'm making is this. I believed, and I am right, that you don't have to do these flash in the pan commercials. They don't have to appeal to your lizard brain and your sort of like appetite for The Shining. Actually, when we did commercials that were funny, that had a beginning, a middle, and an end, there was a narrative, there was a sketch to it or something. We found that those commercials, and this is all new to me now, but those commercials did better, far better than the latter. The ones that actually had a narrative and had people actually listening and watching for a minute or more actually did better in conversion and getting people to actually buy the product, which is all that matters when it comes to marketing. Anyway, that was
that's such an interesting point. It was something that was on my list I wanted to talk to you about, is the nature of storytelling. Because since I started my podcast journey, I'm actually this is part 2. I was podcasting 17 years ago in college, but that is it didn't take off. It didn't take off. I got a few listeners on campus, but it didn't go big. Yeah, but and some of the feedback I got one of the greatest agents in the world, Craig Kitchen, who is Rush Limbaugh's agent, et cetera, Radio Hall of Fame. And one thing that he's always very mild with his feedback and criticism, because he knows I'm talent now. I'm not just management, so he's got to be careful. But he likes the storytelling. Like, he wants to hear me tell stories. And when I get email, a lot of it is a story resonated, not just me mowing through the headlines and why I think they matter. When I told a story about something, it could be something very meaningful, it could be something very minor, that really does get that response. And this, I feel like, this is always going to be compelling to people. This is when we were around campfires with no technology. I mean, the idea of an iPhone would have been impossible. And it does feel like that is one of the greatest gifts you can give the world, to be able to tell a good story. And it feels like that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, it is, because we have an insatiable appetite for story. And if you think about what a story is, if you think about the theme of a story, right? Nobody ever really thinks about what that is. But a theme of a story is probably something like the author's argument for how one should behave in the world. It's what we're doing right now in this podcast. It's whether you know it or not. Well, yeah, you do know it, of course. We live our lives in a way. You do this podcast. You're with Breitbart because you're arguing for your perspective, which means a lot to you. And I think we define ourselves on the lines in which we're willing to defend, maybe even fight for, maybe even die for, if you want to get dramatic.
Sure. Absolutely. No, that is, I conceptualize it exactly that way. I say that to my wife. It's like, that's the whole point of this, is that I would die for these ideas.
That's
like,
right.
They matter for me that much.
Very, very important to that's called a principled person. And a plot to a story is probably something like the choices the main character makes along the way to get what they want. Now, then we can get into the spine of the story is what the character wants. You have to try to get the audience to want that with the character, and maybe the character gives up what they want for what they actually need at the end of it. That's a moral tale, and we can get into that. But I don't think we ever lose the appetite for that, because that resonates with our psychic structures. It resonates with our psychic structures universally. It seems to be that human beings, whether they're the Yanomami in Brazil or the shaman Inuit in the Arctic, or a Swede or an American, we seem to resonate with certain prototypes and certain stories. Something like Hero's Journey, right? A human being that faces that comes into the situation as a girl or a boy, faces their biggest fear, a dragon they don't recognize. They fight the dragon with armor they don't even have. They don't even know that everything they've prepared for doesn't work. And somehow they find a way to get through it by doing something good, truthful, sacrificial, brave, blah, 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 and they come out a new person. We never lose our appetite for that. And all of us going through that one way or another. All of us.
Yeah, I guess my version of that in the talk show space is where I prepare all these talking points for a Fox News hit, and then they just throw something at me that I don't know nothing about that was not on the rundown, and then I gotta come up with something clever and act like I know what I'm talking about in front of millions of people.
Yeah, that's hard to do, isn't it? I'm always afraid of that because I find myself.
Oh no, and it happens. You have to embrace it. Well, you have to embrace that. You prepare all day for a 90-second appearance, and then they probably want to ask you about the thing you prepared for, and you got to be cool with it.
It drives you crazy. I'd say this a good exercise for everyone. I was thinking about this recently. Was sometimes I think maybe I'm as big a problem in the world as the people I criticize. It may be so. I may not be the star.
No, it's as an exercise. This is great. Keep going.
Well, you start to think, what do I actually know? How did I come to know this? What is it that I'm defending? And am I doing that am I defending my father? Am I defending a way of life that worked for me? I'm on the winning side of history. So I got to be careful about being blind to the things that I've not been exposed to or experienced. So that's a good exercise. And, what are these lines I'm defending? And why am I defending them? And how can I know? And how did I come to know what I know? Just do that exercise and always keep yourself honest to that degree, because I think only good things come from that.
It makes the world a much more interesting place. I had a conversation about earlier this week on the show with John Nolte, who's one of our top writers, about just the concept of the 2 term limits and how we just cap it at 2, and we're kind of cool with it. But could you articulate why we only have 2? Because I'll tell you, as of today, I'm sure both parties would love to run Donald Trump and Barack Obama next time. So so how do we get this? I'm not saying it's a bad idea.
No,
I'm just saying, to go through the exercise of why do I think this way? Because someone told me when I was 11 years old.
Well, first, let's not drown in relativity either. Let's not fall into the trap that a lot of intellectuals fall into, which is, I don't know, sometimes maybe it depends. You do have to make a stand. And one of the things that some things I'm not confused about are things like the founding fathers, Madison, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, Thomas Jefferson, maybe to a lesser extent Ben Franklin, but the founding fathers, these men in their 30s, they solved the political problem. They just did. One of the greatest things that Madison did was figured out how to, in the Federalist Papers, avoid faction. How do you stop a cabal of men, a faction, from taking over all the other factions and then taking command of the standing army? That was the story of history. He figured out, and of course with John Jay and Hamilton and some other people, but he figured out how to make sure that power does not sit in one group's hands. What Donald Trump is doing right now is pretty revolutionary, and I like a lot of what he's doing. But I'm also comforted in the fact that regardless of whether I agree with the Trump administration or a conservative agenda, I am also comforted with the fact that these executive orders will be challenged and adjudicated. They will be challenged in the court of law. And that is because we are a country of law, not a country of man, ruled by man. Very important distinction. So there are some things that I am going to fight for that I'm not a relativist about. There are some things that I believe that there is truth, not my truth. I believe there is the truth, and there is a true way to live, and then there's a false way to live. And I think.
Okay, so you guys have heard me talk about Juvent Micro Impact Platform. I'm still in my routine, and I got to tell you, I am feeling absolutely fantastic. I hit it right when I get Master Marlowe Jr. home from school, get on there, start my editorial call with my team, get filled in on all the great news, everything great Trump is doing, all the executive orders, and I'm getting healthier while I'm doing it. This is a safe way to balance out all the sitting at work, in traffic, the scrolling, all we do. It creates joint pain, stiff muscles, and most importantly, weakened bones. Juvent is changing the game. It's cutting-edge science. Remember, it's developed for astronauts trying to regain their bone health when they were coming back from spacewalks and the like. Their micro impacts improve joint health, boosting bone density. They speed up recovery, which is huge for me. Whether you're hitting the gym hard, working on your feet all day, or you're just trying to feel good as you age, I'll be honest, I ran this by the trusted voices in my life. I'm not going to bring anything medical to you that I haven't done that. Board certified doctors in my family. They told me this technology is legit. And I got to say, it's been easy to incorporate in my life. It's kind of pleasant, to be honest with you. It's almost zero effort. Stand on the platform. It's like a 10, 20-minute workout. Super simple to do. Activates the areas of my body that are neglected while I'm sitting and scrolling. And I just do it while I'm on my team huddle. You guys know this. My favorite thing to do. But whatever you want to do, watching TV, scrolling on X, looking on the gram, whatever you want to do, don't waste that time. Reclaim it. With Juvent, you're doing something good for your health. Easy to do, 10-year warranty, financing options available, FSA funds. The software calibrates to your body, so anyone in your family can get on it. You got one, the whole family's on it. I mean, even the little guy on it, he was having fun with it. He gets a little bored. He can't do the 20 minutes like I can do, but for me, I'm good with it. I love to do it. And if you don't like it after 6 weeks, Juvent will buy the platform back for you. So you don't have to take my word for it. Literally just try it out. Juvent.com/Marlowe. Code Marlowe at checkout, $500 off. 500. Juvent.com/Marlowe. You get $500 off. Take control of your health in 2025. See the results for yourself. Do what I'm doing. Juvent.com/Marlowe. But I'm saying that if I went down the street and if I went down to the Trader Joe's parking lot near my house, and I stopped everyone on the way in, and I would say, do you believe that we should limit the president to 2 terms? Almost everyone would say yes. And then I would say, why? And they would say, because I learned that in class. Like, they wouldn't have said, well, actually, I mean, part of what the founding fathers were thinking about is you don't want to give one individual enough time to commandeer a standing army, use it for his purposes. And it really is the nature of a republic. Is we want to have checks and balances where ultimately people are accountable to the citizens, so we can't have some sort of a dictatorship. And they're going to have that argument. They're going to have, you know what? I think I remember that I believe that. And that's why it's important to go through the exercise of why do I believe what I believe, which is not what the left wants right now. They want us to assume that you can get, if I yell at you, you've been watching the hearings this week, I'm sure. If I yell at you loud enough, then all of a sudden you have the same, you have to agree. That is blackmail. That's emotional blackmail. And I feel like people are over it, but it worked for a while, and that's scary. Yeah, but I do feel like people are over it.
No, there's currency in amplifying your monologue. There's currency in it.
Yes.
These people understand that the days of nuance and working something out with the other side, there's not as much fruit in that as being the one person to yell and scream, because your base will click that up.
Right.
And on YouTube, it'll say, Elizabeth Warren crushes RFK in devastating, whatever it is. And but it's on both sides. They just love to do that. And that's how you get not only currency, but how you probably get reelected, how you stay relevant. That's unfortunate. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was seeing some of the commentary on RFK's confirmation, and it's almost all partisan in both sides. But it's interesting how the people who were criticizing him, it was mostly not about the quality of his arguments. Like, he had a moment where he walked through, a lot of people say that I'm anti-vaccine because of a quote from a Lex Friedman podcast that was taken out of context online, and they cut off the second half of the sentence where I said that I'm not pro any vaccine for all people. And like, they cut off the for all people part. It's like, oh, wow. Like, if everyone heard him say that, then you would have probably a different opinion of him.
They've been doing that to Trump for how long? I mean, they've been doing this to Trump so blatantly, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, right.
They've been doing this to the mainstream media is so clumsy and silly. They're so goofy. And they've been doing this to everybody for the longest time who is on the other side of their ideological perspective. And I use ideological because they're not thoughtful. I'm sorry. And that's why they've lost their relevance. Because what happens on YouTube and on Substack and all these other things that didn't happen back in the day was that people go, hey, dummies, you left out a very important part of what this person was saying.
Right.
No, they're not fine people on both sides. That's not just what he was saying. And you know it. You know it. And stop trying to fool us and stop gaslighting us and making us look stupid. Human beings, right, left, doesn't matter. They don't like to be lied to. And it's very obvious that these these companies like MSNBC and CNN are slaves to their ratings, slaves to their tiny echo chamber, and slaves to their very limited and very privileged lived experience, to quote them.
Yeah, right.
I love it.
So
Watching them eat it.
So I've been evangelizing this point that I honestly think Trump's podcast strategy was what sealed the election for him. I thought he was going to win, to be frank, when the FBI was going through Melania's underwear drawer in Mar-a-Lago looking for state secrets. I thought once that happened, I thought he was probably going to win.
I didn't. I was worried. I thought that was real. I was very worried that the judicial system was being weaponized, and they were very creative DAs. I couldn't believe the FBI had been compromised to that degree. I thought it was outrageous. I was you would have been irresponsible to not approach things that way. But I'm saying that if a gun to my head, I would have said, I still believe that the country is legit enough where you can't do that to a former president and his wife and his son. They're in Barron's Peloton room. Looking for, it's ridiculous. So anyway, but I do think what really sealed the deal was the podcast. And I think that going around the establishment media, this was a twofer. The podcast strategy that Trump did, where he went on all these huge shows, including Rogan's, at the very end, was, first of all, it was going around the establishment media to people who are skeptical of the establishment media. They might be apolitical. They don't necessarily know they're voting. But also, it proved that he can hang for 3 hours and have a conversation, and he can move in his feet, which Kamala Harris can't do that for 15 minutes. She can't do 20 minutes of that. And she would be completely uncomfortable. She would be in a cold sweat trying to be in one of those environments. And we like people who are in those environments. I liken it to a great dinner party. For me, maybe I'm just of a certain age and I have a certain type of brain, but for me, that really is sort of the ultimate pleasurable experience as a human being, is if you're at a dinner and you're eating well and drinking well and you've stimulating conversation with smart people. Life isn't better than that for me. I mean, that's the ultimate. Rogan's superpower is he's able to make somebody look very human. He did it with Bernie Sanders. He definitely did it with Donald Trump. I was on the podcast the day after Trump was there. And maybe 2 days after, but I think it was the day after. And when we were talking about Kamala Harris, because I wanted Kamala Harris to get on there, I wanted to see who she was.
Absolutely.
I kind of wanted Joe to drag her into deep water personally, because I can't stand her. But and I had to look up. I had to look into why I couldn't stand her. Some of this was just an emotional reaction. I think she's a condescending person, and I don't agree with anything she says. But I had to kind of take myself to task. But I did some research and I doubled down. But I wanted Joe to do that. And when I was on the podcast, I was very pointed to say, well, I know you wouldn't make her look stupid. You just want to, and he goes, yeah, I just want to talk to her. If her team doesn't want me to ask any questions that are, I won't. I just want to, tell me what you want me to ask her, but let me talk to her. And he was trying to make it safe. He was trying to sort of figure out a way to make it safe. Now, she knew, I think, that she wasn't going to get away with anything and that he was going to ask her questions and he was going to be very pointed and it was going to be a real conversation. And she's terrified of that. Maybe she was terrified of him because she had the wrong idea of who he was. I don't know. But he would have been very fair to her. Of
course. But she doesn't look good when someone's fair. She would need to be the victim somehow, or else it wouldn't be a win. In fact, if he demonized her, if he made her look stupid, she probably could have done the show because she would have had that card. She wouldn't have had that card because he would have treated her fair. He lets them talk. I listened to the last one of his shows I listened to. It was the Quentin Tarantino one with Roger Avery recently. And I don't even remember Joe talking. Like, he just lets them roll for 3 hours, basically. So Kamala can't roll for 3 hours. She couldn't roll for 3 hours on a single subject matter.
You are correct, sir. You are correct. And that's because the reason is because I really believe that the left's political point of view is there's nothing to moor into. If the truth is whatever you feel it is, if you are a man or a woman based on how you feel, and that can change with your feelings, then I have no bedrock in which to moor into. I don't have a springboard I can jump from. I have nowhere to launch a philosophy that I can apply at the level of detail and at the level of concrete life. And so if you're going to tell me that a man is a man because of how I feel, or vice versa, but we should trust the science when it comes to vaccines. There are 1,000 things here that just don't make any sense. If you're going to tell me that the United States is only an imperialistic, paternalistic, rape culture / genocidal regime, and I'm walking around and I see something very different, which is that just people of all ilks trying to get by the best way they can, trying to get food on the table for the customers, trying to get a product out there for the customers, and everybody's joking and laughing and working together. Nobody's worrying about your pronouns. I don't have time, bro. I'm too busy with the what? What are you saying? What do you want me to call you? Whatever you want. I'll call you XYZ, whatever it is. We got to get going, though. I got customers. The food is getting cold.
Exactly.
That's how we live. That's how all the rest of us are.
Yeah, exactly. We got a beach house going. Like, we got to go get some 2x4s in the ground.
I got 2 kids with the flu. I'm way too busy just trying to keep them from coughing too much. I'm trying to teach my son how to cover his mouth when he coughs. Not what gender is, you morons. I don't have time for that shit. It drives me nuts. Yeah. But all of us knew that. All of us knew that.
We all knew it. That's right. But we tolerate it. And so this is where I was going to ask you something, because I'm experiencing this. There's a bittersweet thing going on, because all of a sudden everyone agrees with me, and they agree with me on stuff that was basic. And then, I spent years when Breitbart, we've been so big. I've been very lucky in the sense that we've always been big enough where we've had a big enough community on our own. But it is weird when, you grew up in Los Angeles and your mom's Jewish and all your friends are Jewish and you're called anti-Semitic because of, some headline a Jewish guy wrote, 10 years ago. And I dealt with that for a long time. And then now everyone kind of gets it. And then you were called a racist, even though I have so many people in my life with brown skin. I mean, I live in a neighborhood where
you're making the wrong argument. You're already losing. Yeah, once you say that, look, like when they call Dave Chappelle a white supremacist, or they call different Larry Ellison a white supremacist, what that's based on is the idea that if you accept, this is a radical idea. The revolutionaries said, if you accept the system, if you live within the system of the American system, you can monetize being a communist or a far left person. Yeah. AOC is going to make a fortune. She's probably made $100 million just on speaking fees in her book. So you will get enveloped into the oppressive, capitalistic, binary system, regardless of what you say. So you've got to be an absolute abolitionist. You've got to tear down the institutions. That's the danger of critical race theory. It's not that critical race theory doesn't have good scholarship to it, where you break down the intersectionalist sort of notions of what it's like to be a black woman versus a black man. There's some really interesting thoughts there. Has nothing to do with that. But Derek Bell and the rest of the early critical race theorists were actually advocating for the tearing down of all the American institutions. And what do you put in that place? Something called equality. Oh, I don't know, like communism.
Yeah, that's it. It's all back toward communism. That's all what it's about. But it's just, I was wondering about this in the comedy space, because it was very clear for a long time that the self-censorship was making comedy much worse. Todd Phillips, who did the Hangover movie, saying he got out of directing comedies, and he did The Joker, which you were in also, which was an amazing movie. Yeah. And it's
5 days with Joaquin Phoenix. And I looked at Todd after like the fourth day, and I go, hey, bro, come over here, because I know him really well. And he goes, yeah. And I go, I'm not going to be in this movie, am I? I'm going to end up on the cutting room floor. I get to see the way they were shooting it. And he was like, yeah. I was like, exactly. So you see, don't blink when you see me. Don't blink. You can hear me.
That's so funny.
Comedy for a while was under attack. The comedy
but here's my point. I'm connecting it to my political world, where I have these very normal views and what I think of as sort of centrist in a lot of ways, and they were just called racist just because that was what we did. So for you had to realize that the pendulum was going to swing back in the comedy world, right? Like comedy was not going to survive with the level of censorship that people were doing themselves circa 6-8 years ago.
Comics didn't censor themselves. None of my friends, nobody I knew, including myself, ever for 1 second censored ourselves. I went the other way, and so did a lot of people, and we paid for it to an extent. But there was a point where the Comedy Store was being called by the LA Times, that rag, and a bunch of other people by certain journalists / activists. They call them journalists. They use that word very loosely. And they kept saying, why is your lineup only white straight males? Oh, I don't know, because these are the guys that have been doing it for 30 years and have proved time and again that they're They can crush any room, anywhere, dumb.
Yeah.
And it's not, and if there's any place that's incredibly egalitarian, in fact, it was the comedy space, stand-up comics. If you were funny, we didn't care if you were trans, black, we didn't care what you were. If you were funny, you want a place in that lineup. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. And it feels like, but the comedy is sort of a pure meritocracy in a way, right? I mean, you can't.
Sure. You can't. It's like fighting, Alex. Fighting. There are three things you can't fake: fighting, dance, and comedy. Okay. I don't care who your agent.
Dan, such a great call.
If you're in that ring, bro, I don't care how much height there is. You can either knock the guy out, or your hands are either up or not. You either have an arsenal of weaponry, you either have a strategy, or you don't, or you get creamed. And
yeah, there's no auto tuning. I mean, you got to be able to.
Famous you are. I've seen very famous people try stand up, and it's great for the first 3 minutes, and it gets right quiet. You can hear dogs barking in the distance if you're not ready. And let me tell you something, man. It's the great equalizer. So you either have the goods, baby, or you don't. And I don't care who you are. Try doing your bullshit in Pittsburgh where people work for a living. You might be famous for a while and they get a little giddy for 5 minutes. But then after that, they're like, hey, make me laugh. I work for a living. I paid my money. And it'll get quiet. And then dance is the same way. You can see somebody who can dance, and singing. Let's add singing to that. You can either sing, you can either dance, you can either fight, or you can either make people laugh. And no amount of hype is going to help you otherwise.
You know, I want to ask you about give me a day when you've got, give me a day in the life where you've got you got a gig that night and it's later at night. Because for me, and I like to give public speeches. I give several a year. I get up for them. But you know, it stresses you out the whole day, like where, at least for me, and I'm comfortable with it in general. But give me a day in the life where you've got a set that night. It's a big set, and it's what are you doing to amuse your brain that day? Because I'd be a ball of stress.
I'm the wrong guy to ask. I've been doing it too long. So I just shot the special at Rogan's club, the Mothership, 2 weeks.
Sure.
And it was a Saturday, and you know, people are like, are you preparing and stuff like that? And
yeah,
I mean, the answer is not even a little bit. Like,
wow.
But I've been doing it so long that it's no different than what I'm doing with you right now. Like, in a way, like, I mean, I get myself hyped up, my energy a little bit, but I'm backstage and I'm about to go on, but I've been doing this for so long that it's where I feel the most comfortable. So, you know, I guess you get no, I mean, honestly, I just don't get.
But that's very cool then. Well, I mean, then that's.
I was with Rogan and we were doing the Toronto theater, and it was like, you know, 3,500 people, and I was going to go on and I think I did like 45 minutes or something, and the camera was there, and somebody said, "Are you nervous?" And it didn't dawn on me. Like I was like, it just didn't dawn. I've been doing it so long that it just didn't dawn on me.
Okay. All right, fine. Maybe I have a better question.
I'm a little bit weird. I've been doing it so long. But so, for example, I think like Rogan, to speak out of turn, but Rogan, I don't think Rogan eats before he goes on. Like he's playing for 14,000 people, and it's not that he's nervous, but he's going to get his body ready. And for me, what works is to put nothing on it. Like, I don't know, if I'm tired, I'll use that. If I'm hyped, I'll use that. If I'm depressed that day, I'll use that. If I'm happy, I'll use that. So whatever I'm feeling is you're going to see on stage. And I don't know what's going to go on. I might see somebody with crazy hair and I'm going to talk about that. I don't know. We'll see.
But that's terrific advice, because I feel like, because I do a lot of different types of performance these days, because I'm doing all these TV hits and I do the podcasting and occasionally I speak, and a different tone works at different times. And it's just kind of writing the authenticity seems to be, how are you authentically feeling in that moment?
So
I kind of feel like
authenticity is another thing. Just tell the truth. Just tell the truth. And then just say this to yourself. I like this mantra. Just say, I don't know. And then get out of your own way. Just get out of the way. Just say, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Just say, we'll see.
Okay. Maybe this is a more fun question. So you got a 45-minute set, which is, how often you do 45 minutes? That's a lot.
I do a little bit over an hour every time.
Every time. Okay. So the audience is dead and you're 7 minutes in. What are you thinking? I'm going to bring them back? Or are you thinking this is going to be a long hour?
I got a bag of tricks, brother. So it's not, the audience is not going to be dead.
I know. I want to hear the tricks. Like, that's what I'm asking for. Like, what are the tricks?
You know, I've got, you know, I shot my 5th special. That's 5 hours. So Amazing. I've written probably 10 hours, you know, like, you know, when you've been doing it long, you've written so much. It's my life. It's all I do. And so I just did this corporate gig in Vegas for like a bunch of shadowy warriors. It was like literally Delta Force, the CIA, SEAL Team 6. I mean, these real like just traps and facial hair and just like, SWAT teams. It's a pretty formidable group of looking guys and women, but mostly guys. And it was also in a conference room, so it wasn't good acoustics. It wasn't really a place that was built for stand up.
Yeah.
And the lights were all on. That can be very difficult. So, but even in that situation, what I'll do in that situation, if I feel that they're not quite with me yet, is I'll key in on a couple audience members. If I see a guy wearing a cowboy hat, I'm going to have to roast him for a while. You understand? If I see a bunch of really tough SEAL Team 6 guys sitting there with traps.
Hey, bud, you picked a bad day to wear a cowboy hat.
I'm going to find one of those guys and I'm going to be like, one of you guys is a cross-dresser and I know this for a fact, and I'll just do that. And all of a sudden they're like, So you get them in with you, and you have to sort of, maybe I'll offer this. I'm going to quote Maria Callas, the great diva. She said, art is domination. When she goes out on stage, she is going to show you how.
Gosh, I love that so much.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that so much because I think of it in terms of, I still, I'm grew up in LA, grew up in Hollywood. It's the movies are the ultimate art form to me. And it's because a great movie, it is done to you. You have to submit to it. And it imposes its will upon you. And that's when you walk out.
On you. Schopenhauer and Nietzsche would talk about that. It casts a spell on you when you see a great performance, a great movie, a story well told. You know what happens to you? You forget you're human for a while.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
You have to go to the bathroom. You have to have sleep. You forget about your money troubles. You forget about sex. You forget about your wife. You're literally in high relief. You're like, this is as close to God. That's why you laugh and cry in a good way. When you cry in a good way, because it's too much for you to handle. Because the beauty of life sometimes, the glory of life is so powerful that you actually start crying. You embarrass yourself. When I was on a date, and I took my date to see Death of a Salesman with Brian Dennehy on Broadway. I don't know when it was. Who cares? It was early 2000s. Dude, I was crying so hard, and everybody else around me. Because it was sometimes things are so beautiful you can't stand it. So I don't know. That's what happens to you.
No, I have a big, I come from a theater family. I studied classical music in college. So it's I was a music minor at UC Berkeley.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you play?
I played violin at the time. I was not great. I was probably better than I thought I was, but I went to Harvard Westlake in LA. And it's one of the greatest high schools in terms of academics, also super woke and trying to kill itself with that. But when you grow up playing next to, Alice Chen and Billy Whitaker and Mia Barcia Colombo and Max Hamer and like these guys are just, it's just like, oh, well, I'm terrible. Like, I probably wasn't terrible. I was probably pretty good.
Right.
But I was terrible compared to them. And then, so I didn't do much performance, but I've always appreciated it. And it's one of these things where you are powerless against it, against a Beethoven symphony, a Mendelssohn violin concerto. I mean, like, there's nothing you can do if you speak the language. It's just, its will is imposed upon you when you listen to it. And that's so cool. Yeah. It's just it is out of body. You do feel like you're close to God, as you said.
I think so. I watch a great pianist, a concert pianist play something, and I just can't believe it. Like, I cannot believe human beings are able to do that. This is the idea behind a human being, right? Like, a piano is this box, but when it's touched the right way, it's not a piano until it's touched the right way. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just a box. And maybe human beings can be looked at the same way. I suppose you could break me down into my protozoa and my genome and a number of other biometrics, and you could say that's a human being. It's not. A human being, when I think of, like, under favorable circumstances, a human being is capable of creating, unimaginable beauty. Unimaginable beauty. Shakespeare, Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, I mean, Duke Ellington, John Coltrane, Charlie Parker, Wynton Marsalis. Like, what are you talking about? How did you come up with a horn like that? First of all, who made that horn? And then, right? And then how do you know how to play it like that? And how do you have the physical dexterity? And what are you doing? Charlie Black, who was, you ever hear the story about when Charlie Black was the lawyer for Brown versus Board of Education? Do you know the story?
I haven't heard in a while if I do.
Charlie Black was a 16-year-old kid from the South who was raised to believe that black people were inferior. They were simply not as smart as white man. That's what he was raised to believe. And he believed it wholeheartedly. And there was a whole, body of pseudo scholarship that he was immersed in around that. There was that black people should be there and you should be here. And it's just how he thought the way the world worked. And then he heard Louis Armstrong on the radio. And somebody said, that's a black man. And he said something like, that sounds like God to me. And everything I'm told is a lie. Everything I've told is a lie. Because if that black man can make that sound and he's doing something to me, then I have been lied to. And he went to law school, and he was the lead lawyer to argue for Brown versus Board of Education. And it was because Louis Armstrong was blowing his horn. And I just love that butterfly effect, man. So if you think it's...
Wow, what a great story.
Yeah, it's important.
Fantastic storytelling there, Bryan. Wonderful. I want to go back because this is the big thing for me. I'm obsessed with this concept because this is what's giving me the most hope for the future. And I know you got a big family. I got a big family. And I don't want to grow up in an environment where I don't want our kids to grow up in an environment where you've got the establishment censoring thought and imposing what they view as the truth, which is not the truth, on us. And I feel like the real reaction is happening in this sort of freeform podcasting space more than anywhere else. And I'm hoping that that's going to cascade out into our politics, et cetera. You saw how the White House opened up their first press briefing saying we're bringing in new media. And not only that if you have a big following, you're going to be open to coming in the White House press room and you're going to be open to asking questions. And this is my dream as someone who has seen what Hollywood and the news media have done to this country by essentially imposing a sort of orthodoxy, which is not real. It's what they would like to be real. It feels like it's dying. And this could be the greatest thing ever, but we have a lot of responsibility now because we can't make the same mistakes they made in this new media renaissance.
And we will. Something gained, something lost. I worry also, though, that all of us, it's very hard to orient ourselves around the singular truth or the truth, because I don't know where it's coming from. I also worry that you can look at data in 1,000 different ways. Seed oils are bad for you. Are they? Are they, doctor? Well, I don't see any actual evidence for that.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
1,000 things that people will go, vaccines or this and that. Really? Okay. Well, I mean, there's a lot of doctors and scientists that gain a lot by coming up with a bunch of data to say how dangerous X, Y, and Z is. But, and there are a lot of people, and they can really cause a lot of mischief. I just worry sometimes that with new media, there aren't any gatekeepers. And I think, but I'm optimistic also because I do think if you let the marketplace decide, there will be outlets that we can trust. That's what happens in a free society. There is a real need, and there's a great deal of money if you can be not only authentic in your I guess, effort, but also if I can count on what you're saying to have been checked out thoroughly. And so I know that this is not deep fake. I know this is not AI. I know that this is not even partisan, but what you're saying is responsive to the evidence that I can measure. I hope the marketplace creates not gatekeepers, but rather a place where I know this is true and this is false. We don't have that quite yet.
Yeah, you're speaking exactly my language here, because I can accept, and this is something that we've talked about a bit on the show this week with the Robert Kennedy confirmation, is that it's okay, so we're all acknowledging we're over medicated, but does that mean that do we know the path forward? And I feel like a lot of people online they feel like, well, we've identified the problem and the most popular solution on Twitter, like that must be the answer. It's not necessarily the answer, because those solutions aren't always backed up by data. And if there is data, then who compiled the data? And, it is going to be one of these things where we're going to have to work it out. We're going to make a lot of mistakes. And I just want people to not make the same mistakes of doing imposing I feel like sometimes we act like we've got the answers that we don't. And it's okay to have nuance. It's okay to ask questions. And don't feel like just because we know something's a problem, it means we know the exact solution.
I would say be careful of anyone, Robert F. Kennedy, whoever it might be, just be mindful. And I'm not saying this is Robert F. Kennedy necessarily, but I'm saying be careful of anyone who shows up on a podcast to tell you that everything they learned in medical school is wrong.
Yes.
Be careful.
Oh, you're so right.
Be careful of anybody who says everything you've learned in science, everything NASA's telling you, everything the big pharma's telling you, everything your doctor's telling you is wrong, and I'm right. I promised you that person's selling something. Look closely enough. And if they're not selling something now, they will be later. So those are the false gods the false prophets, and you better be careful of those people. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Scientific consensus does matter. It does mean something. Can the data be skewed? Can there be pressure put on scientists to come to certain conclusions? Of course. Is Big Pharma all good? No. Do they save a lot of lives? Yes. Is the United States the most innovative, by far innovative, place on the planet when it comes to new medicines, new therapies, new life-saving techniques? Yes. Why? Because there's a profit there. So good and bad, good and bad, good and bad. Something gained, something lost. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
You and I are exactly on the same page of that. And that's one thing I'm a little nervous about, but I'm open to whatever's next, because the gatekeeping by the CBSs and of the New York Times has gone very terrible for the country. So it's time to do something different, but we got to be careful as we embark on the new space. One thing I was going to ask you is, do you feel like that there's definitely an overlap, but why is there an overlap, do you think, with this rise of the ultimate fighting and that popularity with the long form podcasting space? Because there's so much overlap, and I know a lot of it can be traced to Rogan specifically, but it feels like it's broader than that. It feels like there's two cultural phenomenons of a lot of overlap, and I don't really understand it, but I think that it's definitely happening.
It might
I
have
just want to know what it is.
It has something to do more than just Rogan, who loves UFC and stuff. But I think part of it might be this attack, this sustained and ferocious attack on all things masculinity. Being competitive and aggressive has been painted a liability. And the left had a very, very effective tool at coming after powerful men by coming after who they were having sex with, weaponizing regret, the whole Me Too movement. But also just in general, boys were told that being rambunctious and being roughhousing and being violent and competitive was somehow dangerous, bad for society. It created a patriarchy. The patriarchy itself was considered, authority was considered oppressive and not just competent. And so I think that the UFC comes along, and what's kind of amazing about the UFC is it's as close, I'm going to quote Rogan, it's about as close as you can get to watching two people try to kill themselves with their bare hands. But as you watch the UFC, you understand how important technique is. Wrestling, jiu-jitsu, boxing, Muay Thai, distance, like how to capitalize on somebody who's really good at striking, but not as good at wrestling, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think in many ways, it's the rawest form of competition. It is as male as it gets, but with a caveat. And I don't know why feminists are talking about this. If you want to see where women have really changed the hearts and minds of bros like me, it's in the octagon. It's in the MMA cage. Women are fighting on a very high level with every bit of the same ferocity and competitiveness as any man, with high skill. Valentina Shevchenko, Amanda Nunes, and a number of new prospects are fighting. I mean, they're so good. And nobody thought that was possible, including Dana White, until people like Ronda Rousey came along. You want to talk about the pioneers when it comes to feminism, real feminism, the kind of pioneers that stepped into the most male-dominated arena on the planet and got men to be as excited about their fights as any man's fight? What the? Are you kidding me? That's what happened. So I think part of it was my layman's guess is that the popularity of the UFC is, first of all, it's an amazing sport. It's an incredible sport. It's the rawest form of competition, but it was also sort of a way for men to simulate some version of warrior energy, masculine energy that's so inherent. What are men? If you think, let me tell you something about men. One of the deepest primal instincts in a man is to provide and to protect. It's so deep in us, man. It just is. And depending on your culture, you're going to provide and protect in a different way. If you're Jewish, for example, you didn't have the luxury of being a protector physically because you were so outnumbered that if you fought a guy who, accosted you, they'd come down and burn down your whole village. You'd suffer some pogrom. So you had to figure out a way to be, innovative, smarter than the rest, really good at business, because that's the only way to survive, for God's sake, in a society that wants you dead, right? Historically. But if you're Spanish, maybe you have the luxury of being a good with a sword and being Casanova. I don't know. I'm just saying that depending on your culture, but the through line among all people, whether they're indigenous in the Amazon or they're an intellectual, a Jewish intellectual from New York, is to provide and protect deep inside of us. And the UFC is the rawest form of that expression, I think. So
it's really interesting that you put it that way, because I do feel like that is, of all the things that give me the most satisfaction, it is just providing and protecting for my family. I mean, that is the thing that animates me the most. That's where I feel like I'm being myself. I feel like my cubs are okay and my wife's happy.
You're fighting all the time, being a part of Breitbart. We're
the Fight Club. That's it. That's what we are. So, Bryan, this has been so fantastic. I would like to make this regular thing if you're up for it. And it is. We normally go about 40 minutes, so we're over an hour. But is there anything else top of mind for you? Because I would love you to have the floor to bring us home here.
I would say I would just implore all of us, and this is to myself as well. Careful of purifying your echo chamber. It's very easy. Your algorithm will lie to you, and it will keep feeding you the things you already agree with. So read people who may disagree with you. Surround yourself with a couple people who are smarter than you are, who have a different perspective. It'll keep you honest. It'll force you to test the foundations upon which you stand. And you might get a better idea of why you believe what you believe, because you may believe what you believe for emotional and maybe the wrong reasons. You might be defending not just your country and the way of life. You might be defending something you're not aware of, which is something like your parents. That's all.
Well said. And I'm leaving some meat in the bone here, but that just gives us a chance to do this again, I think sometime soon. BryanCallen.com. Yeah, let me give the website again just in case. BryanCallen.com. He's got dates coming up in Minnesota and Doral. So we got a lot of South Florida listeners around here, and is all over the internet as well as podcasts. Don't miss that. But it's pretty easy to find. You go to the website. Bryan, fantastic, my friend.
You're a good man. I appreciate
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Nice of you to say that. And thanks for all the support of Breitbart. It's really kind. All right. Thanks, producer Misty, and all of you for telling 10,000 friends and family members about the Alex Marlow Show. Talk to you next time.
Later.